Okay, there you go. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the first proposed 2024-2027 draft budget public consultation session. My name is Eric Labadie, Manager of Corporate Communications, and I will be moderating today's public engagement session. This online session is being hosted on Facebook and YouTube, and another session will be held tomorrow, November 23rd at 7 p.m.
Hi, my name is Brock McGregor. I'm the Budget Chair for the Municipality of Chatham-Kent, and I'm here to review some highlights of the 2024 to 2027 draft budget. This year, we're moving to a multi-year budget, so we'll be looking at the projections over the next 4 years and an anticipated change in the budget over that 4-year period. This year, we'll be approving year one, and each year subsequent, we'll be reevaluating the budget decisions, performing an annual update, and improving budget numbers in those years. So this year's impact in 2024 is 6.57%. Of that 6.57%, we've broken it down into a number of contributing factors to this increase. 4% of the 6.57% increase is attributed to inflation. 1.5% is attributed to increases in infrastructure spending in accordance with our asset management planning. 0.8% is attributed to increased spending on police services, and 0.27% are categorized as others and represent some changes in service levels and improvements in services. Over the next 4 years, we project a 7.82% annual increase. So we can see that's quite a bit lower this year in 2024, peaking in 2025 and back down below the average in 2027. As I mentioned before, we're approving a budget this year, and we will do annual updates in the next 3 years to improve those annual budgets as well. We did want to focus on the police services operational review implementation. So this is related to a third-party operational review and the implementation of those recommendations. There'll be an overview of this report coming to council. It'll be discussed prior to budget, and then there will be a police services presentation during the budget process. We also wanted to highlight infrastructure spending. So over the 4-year budget, we're estimating a capital investment of $277 million in that 4 years. And it can be broken down into a number of different categories: roads, bridges, engineering projects that include other infrastructure in our communities. You can see some spending in recreation and parks, in transit, and in social housing. Of the 0.27% increase that's related to operational changes, we were able to keep that increase relatively low based on some increased revenue and efficiencies from things like inflation on user fees, some interest increases in investments. There have been some reductions in FTEs or full-time employee positions. We're expecting some increased revenues through service level agreements and do expect some increased funding through the Building Faster Fund, as well as a transition to a producer pay model in the Blue Box Transition Program. One thing we're often asked is how our tax burden compares to other communities. So this chart is from the BMA studies, which survey a number of other municipalities throughout Ontario and offer some comparators. So this graph is municipalities over 100,000 in population and the average tax burden on a detached bungalow home. So it's essentially the same house, a single detached bungalow. If you were to find it in each different community, this is your relative tax burden. And you can see in this group that Chatham-Kent is the lowest in the group, just over $3,000 in taxes for that type of home. And it increases through a number of other municipalities all the way up to the high end in Markham that is quite a bit higher than Chatham-Kent. You can see that even our neighbors in Windsor are slightly higher than us, and a number of other communities that are our close comparators still have a relatively higher tax burden. We really appreciate all the public feedback that you can provide. The budget deliberations start next week, and we'll be using the feedback from the community as well as some work by budget committee members and information from staff to further finalize this budget. Thank you, and thank you for your question. Hi, my name's
Thank you, Councillor McGregor. Joining us today, we have our Budget Chair, Councillor Brock McGregor, Michael Dubin, Chief Administrative Officer, and Gord Quinton, Chief Financial Officer and General Manager of Finance, Budget, Information Technology, and Transformation. To help us answer some questions submitted by the public throughout our live consultation session, we have members from our executive management team joining us here as well. If you have questions at home, please submit them in the comment section of this live stream, and we will do our best to read them out and provide answers. Please keep your questions concise and civil. For those wishing to learn more about the proposed budget, you can watch the opening night presentation on Your TV Chatham-Kent's YouTube page and/or visit chatham-kent.ca/ourbudget. We will now begin with some of the questions. We have one pre-submitted from Deborah, and this one will go to you, Gord. Why are tax increases not in line with CPP annual raises?
Thank you. Thank you very much, Gord Quinton, Chief Financial Officer, and thank you very much, Deborah, for that question. For the CPI, we do look to the Bank of Canada and what their projections are. And with this being a multi-year budget, what their latest economic update had when we were forming the budget in the summer was a projection of 3.7% for 2024, 2.5% for 2025, 2.1% for 2026 and 2027. So that is what we have budgeted for inflation in the budget. However, for our asset management plans, often what we're seeing in municipalities isn't reflecting for our infrastructure costs, isn't reflecting what the CPI bucket is, which is usually food, groceries, housing, gas, and things like that. So we have a different bucket of goods that we buy. So for our infrastructure, we also recommended to council an additional 2.3% on top of each of those percentages each year to cover off the increases in inflation we're seeing for infrastructure. So that gets us up a little higher, but not to the 7.82%. The other major increases is for our asset management plan. We're only approximately 50% funded, so council has adopted a policy to add 1.5% more on top of that inflation increase for our asset management plan. In addition to that, policing, they delivered the results of a study that they had and the recommendations that they're going to bring to the budget last night. But that's going to add an additional 1.2% per year for policing. And then there are a variety of items that council has, through their strategic planning process, asked management to bring recommendations to implement those things. Many are related to housing and services that want to be added in the municipality, and that represented another 0.27% in the budget. So that's why it's not just about keeping to inflation. There's much more to it than that, and that's sort of the short version of how we got to 7.82%.
Thank you very much for that, Gord. I've got another question here for you. There is a request to add 0.5% to the budget for tax rate stabilization. Can you please explain further what this request is and what it means?
Thanks for that question. So tax stabilization is a best practice when implementing a multi-year budget. It is it is basically a contingency fund of a 0.5% that we're not adding in 2024 because that's more predictable. But as we move out to 25, 6.7. It's putting away, close to $1 million each year for things that are currently unknown or are not confirmed to be certain yet. I'll give probably a very visible high-level example of that is we are currently running a homeless shelter. At this time, we do not have direction from council past May of 2025 to have a shelter in place. So that's a decision that's going to come up in the next 3 months by council, making a decision on. It's going to be after the budget's approved. This is one of the contingencies that's set aside for that. But I don't want to just focus on the shelter. There's lots of unknowns. Whether it's we have several contracts that come to their end of the life that come up for renewal. There's we've done our best to anticipate things in the budget, but there always will be things that will come up, and this is just a best practice to have a contingency in place.
Thank you very much for that, Gord. We've got another pre-submitted question. This one might be for Kathy, and we've got a corresponding slide from the budget presentation here that may help answer. There's a large number of FTE being requested in the budget. What are all of these FTEs for?
Thank you, Eric, and thank you for the question. As you'll see on the slide before you, currently in the draft budget, we have a total of 5.08 FTEs being requested for our municipal operations. This excludes the police and the fire master plan implementation. Related to the police implementation, there is a request of a total of 43 new staff over the 4-year period, and those are also all tax funded. So the ones you see on the list here are tax funded, as well as the 43 new staff over the 4-year period for police services. So that's a total of 48.08 positions tax funded over the 4-year period. There are some additional requests for staffing that relate to, and I'm not sure, Eric, if you're planning on showing another slide related to that, or did you want me to leave it there right now?
I think that'll be good for now.
Thank you.
Okay, we've got another pre-submitted question. This one is for Gary. Chief Khan, why is there a significant budget increase for police services? Is the community growth being considered for police services?
Yes, thank you for the question. And yes, to your point, that was one of the variables that was taken into consideration in regards to the increase to our staffing. But there were multiple variables. So population, has moderately increased. And this was all garnered or gleaned, I should say, from our Deloitte report. The Deloitte company came in, conducted a 4-month robust analysis in regards to all of these variables that I'm just going to touch on. And as a result of that, their recommendation was actually for an additional 48. However, we were able to narrow that 48 down to 43. But the primary variables that are affecting and causing the increase really come back to the population moderately increasing, as we've already stated. We've seen, obviously, and you've heard me state this numerous times, the total calls of service have increased. We've seen quite an extensive increase to our calls for service since our inception or amalgamation in 1998, where at that time we would annually respond to approximately 38,000 calls for service. Over the last 5-6 years, that 38,000 has now increased to anywhere between 75 and 80,000 calls for service. Also, police officers are responding to more calls. Over the last few years, CKPS, our service, has dispatched 17% more calls since 2019. And the calls assigned to them, we use differential response. The priority for these calls has also increased as well. So calls assigned to priority 0, 2, and 3, and they range anywhere from priority 0 to priority 6. Priority 0 being the highest emergency. That's all emergency equipment activated, light, siren, while the officer is responding to the call. All of these, the nature of these calls have increased since 2019, and they range anywhere from 17% increase to as high as a 74% increase. But equally as important is the nature, the complexity and seriousness of these calls have further increased as well. We've seen an increase in the crime rate, and Chatham-Kent is not immune to that as well. Over the last few years, I'm going to say the last 5 years, we've seen an increase in the crime rate by 10%. Finally, we're seeing employees, the well-being and the health and the well-being of our officers is being compromised. And as a result, we're seeing an increase in the number of sick hours taken, which has increased by 29, almost 30%. And the number of people who have taken sick time off has increased by 36%. This ranges from both long-term and WSIB, those officers suffering from some form of an operational stress injury. All of this is affecting our overall staffing levels and the resources that we have or lack thereof. And I guess one final point that I would bring to your attention is that while we've observed an increase in all of those different variables that I just mentioned, our authorized strength has remained constant for the last 6 years, and that is at 164 sworn officers. So given all of these variables, obviously the increase in demand and decrease resource availability has resulted in the budget or the request that we have put forward for an additional 43 members.
Thank you very much, Chief Khan. We've got a question submitted from Larissa, and I think this might be one for you, Gord. According to CK's own budget information, residential property owners pay 63% of the municipal tax levy, but multi-residential only pays 4%. What is in this multi-residential class, and why would its percentage be so low compared to the percentage of CK's population that lives in rental housing versus individually owned homes?
Thank you very much, Larissa, for the question. Eric, if you're able to, if you could put up slide 43.
Absolutely.
Larissa is referring to. So yes, 63% of the taxes becomes something that we deal with in tax policy, basically how to divide up the budget pie, as I say it. And here's the pie chart dividing it up. 63% is by residential, but I think your question was that only 4% is multi-residential and why that's so low. So there's a couple things. First, is how multi-residential buildings are assessed and what puts them into that category. So for structures that have 4 units or less, they actually are in the normal residential category. So we're talking about apartment buildings 5 units or more that are in that 4%. They actually pay through a tax ratio calculation that we have council look at every year in tax policy. They actually pay 1.7 times, approximately 1.7 times the residential rate. So per every $100,000 of assessment, they are paying quite a bit more. But I think the reality is, until the last couple of years, we really didn't have any apartment buildings being built for the last 35 years in Chatham-Kent over that four units, until very recently, and you see quite a few popping up right now. One of the reasons why you see them being built is there was an incentive approved by council to give a tax incentive for the first 10 years of new new rental units, and that was because they were in high demand, and an incentive was needed, as there were like I say, none built over the last few decades. Actually, I've been corrected that 1.7% as 1.94% actually is the multi-res ratio. So they are paying the new ones did get a tax incentive, so that will be a large windfall to council and the public in their taxes when those 10-year agreements expire. So for the rest of their lifetime, over the next 75 years, they will be paying a significant amount of taxes. But for now, they aren't, and that 4% that is paying is just the amount of that's based on the assessment that actually is there for multi-res. So I guess bottom line, we really have no way to adding more to that 4% other than by new buildings be built and the CIP expiring on those buildings. So it will take some time.
Thank you very much for that, Gord. We've got another pre-submitted question here. This might be for April or Michael. Is the budget addressing the community needs in terms of the housing crisis?
Thank you, Eric. It's April Redyke, General Manager, Health and Human Services. I can start, and then certainly our CAO, Michael Dubin, can add if he has any other additional comments. The housing crisis that we are seeing here in Chatham-Kent is certainly being seen right across both the province and the country, and that's why we continue to hear politicians and communities comment on the need for more housing. What I would say is that within the 2024 budget, we are looking at a number of ways to tackle the local housing crisis. Part of that is maintaining the emergency shelter while we navigate through the ongoing effects of both the pandemic and the economy, and you will see that in the budget. We are also working very hard to increase the number of affordable housing units that we have available in Chatham-Kent. That looks at some of the new builds that are happening right now, and hopefully we will see some people move into those new builds during this 4-year budget. But there are other things that we can do to also look at the housing crisis. One of our budget items that you will see in the budget book, and we will talk about over the next couple of weeks, are portable housing benefits. So while we sit here and hope for more housing, affordable housing builds and affordable housing units, we can assist low-income individuals who are really just struggling to make ends meet with what we call a portable housing benefit. And that is where we help to offset some of the rent and we've all seen those rents skyrocketing over the last couple of years. And that's what that does. It allows them to choose their own rental property, find a place that they want to call home, and we assist with some, what probably we would call a bit of a rent top-up, so that they are able to maintain their rent. And part of solving the housing crisis is to look at maintaining tenancy. We want to help tenants be good tenants and to help them keep the units that they do have. We have a number of private nonprofits, 13 organizations provide affordable housing throughout our community. They operate close to 800 affordable housing units, and we want to keep them doing that. So part of our budget kind of request is to provide them with some additional support that will help to maintain those tenancies and keep people housed. We're also looking at CK Renovates and keeping that going, and that assists with some things, say accessibility items or some energy efficiency items that will allow people to stay and maintain their current home and continue to pay property taxes, continue to live out their lives in a place they call home, and they don't then have to come into the housing kind of system where we would have to provide full support for them. So I don't know, our CAO, Michael Dubin, if you have anything to add to that, but I think I'll stop there, Eric.
Okay, thank you very much, April. Just to remind everybody at home, if you have comments for our EMT members or for the budget chair, Councillor Brock McGregor, feel free to enter them in the chat window and we will provide answers for you. I've got another pre-submitted question. I think this one will be for Edward Soldo, our General Manager of Engineering. Edward, is there anything in this budget to help address climate change and be environmentally friendly?
Thanks, Eric, for the question. The budget does include a number of items related to upgrades to our facilities and our buildings to make them much more energy efficient. It also includes an item related to the development and implementation of a comprehensive organics diversion program in Chatham-Kent. That program is going to include solutions for both curbside residents and non-curbside residents to help divert organic waste from the landfill. And really, the purpose of that is to extend the life of the landfill that we have in Chatham-Kent and divert that organic waste from there. It will help reduce our overall carbon footprint as a community as a whole. So I would say to the public, watch out for opportunities for engagement on that program next year as we begin the process of developing an organic waste program.
Thank you very much for that, Edward. We've got another question for Gord, and I'll put up the corresponding slide for you. Gord, how does a multi-year budget benefit the taxpayers?
Yeah, so this is a new thing for Chatham-Kent. It was brought forward by a motion from council in 2020, and we brought a report with the benefits, and there are some cons that it's the unknown basically is the biggest con, but the benefits is the most important thing is a council gets elected from the public to do things in our community, and then council gets together and creates their strategic plan, which really guides staff on, well, what do we want to see implemented in this term of council. Past that, like there really isn't often changes of course. Like council gives the direction of what wants to be done, and for the rest of their term, let's say it was a change in transit or some expanded transit system or something. It takes time to implement it. It's just not instantly done. There's studies to be done, planning and then implementing, and so often it took multiple years to get through to get things going anyway, and this really gives a chance for council to clearly state what their vision is, what needs to be done, and staff go ahead and do it. The first step is building the budget, which is the multi-year budget that is out for the draft version out for review right now. But there really is a lot of I guess behind the scenes, a lot of staff savings and efficiencies that can be delivered to the public by not having to go through the long arduous process every year of creating a budget when I would say 99% of our costs remain constant year to year. You had a fire department last year, we're going to have a fire department next year. We should only be debating the changes coming, and when we can plan those ahead with the council strategic directions, long-term planning, it really becomes much more transparent to the public on what they can expect in the future for tax increases. And one last point I wanted to make: it is a 4-year multi-year budget that does go into the next term of council, and the reason that's done on purpose. Council, there's election the next election will be in October of 2026. They'll be sworn in mid-November 2026, and about a week later, we'll be presented the 2027 budget, and so you had it really never gave time for council to get accustomed to what they're even responsible for as a councillor, to understand the budgets that are in place. That they didn't get to debate their strategic plan as a group yet, so they were often bewildered, and it's very hard to put them in that position of passing a budget just after being elected. So that's the other benefit. It gives some consistency and some breathing room for the incoming council to really get their bearings under them and provide strategic direction, and then we do it for the next 4-year term. Thanks.
Thank you very much for that, Gord. We've got another question from Larissa. This one might be for Gord or for Edward. As the council has stated a goal to help aging homeowners stay in their homes, will the ice and snow removal requirements be waived? Will leaf pickup be available, etc.?
So maybe I'll just start on a couple of issues, then I'm going to turn it over to Edward to get into the details. Particularly leaf pickup. That is a very one of the things that have remained in certain communities from amalgamation that probably is a very inefficient use of tax dollars, and gets into some environmental concerns too of why we're running trucks up and down the road to pick up leaves when they could be mulched in place on people's yards. And so there's so we don't provide a consistent service across. We do area rate for the areas that get that service, and it's one of the the leftover parts that we've been doing for 25 years, but sometimes I think a better job needs to be done on really analyzing why we're doing it and if we need to do them in the future. I'll hand it over to Edward to actually talk about more the snow removal and sidewalks issues.
Yeah, thank you, Gord. In terms of the sidewalk issues related to clearing of snow and ice, we do undertake clearing of the sidewalks. What we do ask is that homeowners help us out in terms of making sure that the sidewalks are safe and that they're accessible for people to walk on. When we go by with our equipment, that equipment doesn't necessarily get down to bare pavement. It's not possible with the machinery that we have. And what we're asking residents to do is go out there and clean up the sidewalks to that level. And so we ensure a level of service that's equal across the municipality. So it is a combined joint effort, a team effort in keeping our sidewalks clear.
Thank you very much for that, gentlemen. I've got another question here from Sue. If all things remain equal and no reductions take place, how does the municipality expect those pensions to pay such a large increase?
Thanks, Sue, for the question, and that's that is council's job now that the draft budget's been handed to them to weigh their strategic directions, what they want to have done, and the affordability of the residents. That's what they're elected to make, those often quite tough decisions on the right balance between that. obviously, municipalities are being a double whammy of costs, not both inflation, but also, I'll just say in general terms, social issues, and whether that's boiling down to increases in police services or increases in housing and homelessness issues. Often in other parts of Canada, the provincial and government takes up a bigger share of responsibility for some of those things. In Ontario, it is being forced on for property taxpayers. I'm not sure if that's fair. In fact, I would say it's not entirely fair. I think I know myself and others are other treasurers across the province are making a case to have other revenue tools other than just property tax. If we're forced to fund all these issues, that's fine. We just need the revenue tools to be able to pay for them, and it just can't all be on property taxpayers. However, that's not a solution right now, because the current direction from the province is that yes, it is going to be on property taxpayers, and so that's why you're seeing increases across the province. In some cases into double digits in many municipalities, and it's because we're taking the property taxpayer, in my opinion, is being forced to take on more than it should, and but ultimately it will be up to council to weigh whether these increases are affordable to the public, or whether they want to provide direction to reduce levels of services to lower the costs. Thanks.
Thank you very much for that, Gord. Another question for you from Sue. The budget is based on current rates of inflation. What happens in future years should the rate of inflation go below the current rate, i.e. 2% or less?
Yes, very good question. I did mention right at the beginning, we actually have used the Bank of Canada forecasts there for what we put in the budget for inflation. And so, for example, as we move, we do think inflation is falling and is going to continue to fall. Bank of Canada still does have that 2% long-term target, and we've used 2.1% for both 2026 and 2027 as our inflation number. So as we have predicted that inflation is going to fall, however, there are some budget pressures that are coming up over this term of council that have sort of taken the place of perhaps the inflation part, and that's why it still remains at an average of 7.82% over the 4 years. Some projects are we have deferred ourselves, but others it's just the matter of timing. Edward just mentioned the organic program that's being also mandated across the province moving forward, but that doesn't hit our budget till 2026. And then there's other issues where we phase things in. So fire master plans is being delivered to council very shortly, but we're phasing in the cost over a number of years, and it has gradual impacts in 26, 27, 25, 26, 27, and will have further impacts in the next multi-year budget in 2028 to 2031. So so the inflation impact is going to drop, but there were some other costs that are hitting are included in our draft budget that keeps us more constant in that 7% range.
Thank you very much, Gord. Next one I think would be good for Edward. Edward, what does the blue box transition mean, and how will it affect me as a taxpayer?
Thanks, Eric, for the question. Starting January 1st, the municipality is not responsible for the Blue Box program. The municipality is only going to be responsible for the curbside waste pickup. The Blue Box transition has been provincially mandated to transfer both the operational and financial responsibility of collecting and processing Blue Box materials from municipalities to the producers of those materials. So as a residential property owner or occupant, that transition actually is not going to really affect you in 24 and 25, as the service is going to be maintained status quo by the contractor who's going to be looking after it for the circular materials contractor, the producer of the materials themselves. So you won't notice a difference. The service will be the same. In 2026, the recycling program may look a little differently, and that's really at the discretion of the producers who are running the program at that point in time. As a taxpayer, your property taxes will be impacted because they're going to be modified to reflect actually an overall cost savings of about $500,000 starting in 2024. But those that'll be impacting those that currently receive the service today. And I believe it is also area rated, so it'll impact only those that are currently receiving the service.
Thank you very much for that, Edward. We've got a question here for Kathy. There's a request for municipal diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice initiatives. Can you provide more information on this request and what it means to the community?
Yes, thank you, Eric, and thank you for the question. For the last couple of years, we have been working on launching a diversity, equity, inclusion, and justice program here at Chatham-Kent. And to this date, the resources have been for funding temporarily the resources to carry on a program. In this year's multi-year budget, we're looking at solidifying the program in a permanent way inside of the organization so that we can support the efforts that have us, as an employer, to be represented as more inclusive, to be a better representation of those that live and come to visit Chatham-Kent, live in and come to visit Chatham-Kent, and as well to be really seen as an employer who is clearly understands and is committed to the social and equality issues of our community and what it is to be an employer. So for purposes of attraction and retention, these will certainly be key strategies to be able to continue the DEIJ work. For the last, up to this point, we have spent time developing both strategies in terms of how a program would need to be resourced and propped up going forward. And they continue to involve things like an examination of our policies to see whether or not we're being inclusive in our policies, making sure that we have appropriate education and training for our employees, and making sure that our actual physical workplace also represents one that represents various views and cultures.
Thank you very much for that, Kathy. We've got another question here from the public. We've got one from Sarah. Given how many financial pressures we face, logic would dictate we spend the least amount possible on City Hall infrastructure. As far as I can tell, the cheapest option is to renovate the existing City Hall and stay there. I wouldn't say that's necessarily a question, more of a statement. So thank you for that, Sarah. We'll move on to a question for you, Gord. I read of a cyber attack at our local hospital and data was stolen. Is there anything in the draft budget to help mitigate those risks municipally?
Thank you for that question. Cybersecurity is tops of minds of everyone, and was before the hospital attack, but certainly with our local healthcare being under attack right now, it's really brought it to the top of the list. But we've been working on this budget for months, and yes, there are several budget items. I'm not going to get into the details of what they actually are, but other than to say it is a costly exercise. These attackers, this is big business. This is often I think the one the hospital for example was the attacks coming from outside of Canada, and Canada public organizations have are becoming a target. I would say there's been a lots of municipalities across Canada that have had a cyber attack recently, and we do. You think of all the business units in a municipality, whether it's health units or police services or just all the services that we maintain. We do have a lot of confidential information. We of course always have been very careful with that with information, but we daily have to fortify those protections even more as the hackers are getting more sophisticated and what they're doing to get into systems. So bottom line is it's another one of those costs above inflation that's hitting our draft budget. There's several hundred thousands of dollars of new funding asked for to address this issue, and I guess my last point on that is we used to even be able to get cyber insurance. That's not available to us anymore because of the amount of attacks that's happening. So we do have it's going back to my theme of should the property taxpayer be forced to pay for all this. I wish the upper levels of government would be helping us on this issue as well, but it's another one of those costs that a municipality is facing.
Thank you very much, Gord. Another question for you. The cost of groceries, gas, etc. seems to be so high these days. Why do our taxes need to go up too?
Yeah, and without repeating thanks for putting up this chart. I did say a little bit of this before, but the question included some of the household expenses that are going up, and this this slide was part of our opening night presentation to sort of talk about some of what we have to buy, whether it's specialized chemicals and building costs and just a different bucket of goods than the consumer. But all those are going up in many cases even higher than the amounts that are facing the consumer. And we really ultimately comes down to levels of services. What services do we want to provide? And it's really a decision of council if they feel that this increase is too much and they want to cut back on a service. In past budgets, we often did bring some services that could be either reduced or cut altogether. Council did act on many of those in the past, but we've sort of gotten, if I say the easy fruit has been picked, and we're now getting into some very tough decisions on whether it's closing facilities or ending a service, and what we're hearing from council, and council represents the people, is that these services, that the community still does want these services to remain. And so that's the I guess the tough place that council's in. I don't envy them at all on the decisions that they have to make over the next couple of weeks, but in their strategic planning, they've asked us to keep the level of the service that we have and budget for them appropriately. and that's what this multi-year draft budget delivers.
Thank you very much for that, Gord. We've got a question that's come in from Sue. Given the federal mini budget yesterday and their announcement on funding for housing, including low-income housing, will the municipality be applying and accessing any of this funding?
So I can start off, but if this if Michael or April have anything to add, feel free to jump in. So it was the fall economic economic update, and yes, some hopefully good news announcements for housing. The devil's always in the details, and the details often take quite a while to come out. I think most importantly, I would say some of the details are some of the new money that was announced yesterday won't the program it may not even land till 2026, 2027. So yes, there was announcements, but it's not for immediate money for housing. And we have an immediate problem. And so where I would say, yes, it's always good news. We have to see the details, and we have to see be able to actually make applications in, and then we're up to a process of seeing if we're approved for those. Michael or April, do you have anything else to add?
Sure, I'll chime in. It's Michael Dubin. I'm the Chief Administrative Officer. I think Gord answered it correctly. I will say this, that anytime there are opportunities for us to leverage provincial funding, federal funding, even private funding to offset whatever the cost of running the organization is, we always pursue that. This is just an announcement by the feds. I'm glad to hear that they understand that housing is a big, important issue in every municipality, not just in Chatham-Kent, not just in the 440 or so municipalities in Ontario, but across Canada. So even though often there's an announcement about millions of dollars, when you look at how many people need it, it doesn't move the needle. It has to be a lot more money. I think they even talked about billions, and as much as that sounds astronomical, given how much help is needed and given how many municipalities need support, I'm always optimistic Chatham-Kent will see some of that money. But as Gord said, that's still a couple of years out. In the interim, we'll have to make do with the resources that are available to us. But we're always pursuing options to leverage dollars from upper levels of government.
Thank you very much for that, Gord and Michael. Next question for you, Gord, and I'll put up the corresponding slide here. How exactly does council approve a multi-year budget?
Yeah, thanks for the question. So we've been learning along the way. We've been educating council along the way, and I'll try to educate the public a little bit more too. Yes, it's a multi-year plan of a budget. It's a multi-year budget, but by the Municipal Act, council actually can only approve 1 year at a time. So they are going to debate, make the cuts that they seem appropriate, maybe add some things that they feel is appropriate. And when they get to a final number, they're going to be asked to approve the 2024 budget. We then will have year 2, 3, and 4 of updates. So these will be a lot shorter, a lot less material presented. It'll basically, has anything changed since the plan that we put forward to you? And for example, the province might have legislated made a legislative change that either cost us more, or I guess hopefully the other way. Perhaps they're going to provide funding for cybersecurity, for example, or something. That'd be great news, and we would, in that annual update, would be able to take that great news in and make those adjustments. So I did talk previously that we do have a contingency in place. to handle that we're recommending to council to have a tax stabilization reserve so that we could handle perhaps some costs that come along the way. But certainly if there's some benefits that came down, we'd also be able to in those annual updates make adjustments downward on the budget and the amount applied to taxes. So there still is an annual process. It's just we call it an annual update. It's just on things that have changed since this plan was delivered.
Thank you very much for that, Gord. I've got one final question. We're reaching the end of our time here, so I'll pose this to you. With all the new builds and growth popping up around Chatham-Kent, why are our taxes going up?
Yes, so we have had some tremendous growth for the last few years. You know, the assessment process through MPAC of those new builds does take some time. So often it's 6 months to a year later before that a new house is assessed, for example, and they be included in the assessment for billing out the taxes. What we have done through a council approved policy is that of any new assessment dollars coming in, the first 1% does go to offset the tax ask. So if it wasn't for a new assessment, new things being built, the request would be at 8.82% instead of 7.82% for the multi-year. Above that, after the first 1% goes to offset taxation, we do then try to align projects, and that's what this chart is showing, is certain projects that the executive management team felt are tied into the growth that we're receiving. So even some of the bigger items here are even part of the police budget ask, for example. We know part of it is because of population growth. There's lots of other reasons that the chief outlined last evening, but population growth is one of them. So we are allocating $250,000 a year from growth dollars to that budget in 25, 6, 7 here. One other thing that I want to I have to remind the public is we do have a community improvement plan. I mentioned it about in relation to apartments being built, where you see them being built, but there was a tax incentive to get them built. That there also are some incentives on commercial properties. So sometimes what you're seeing is a delay in seeing the you're seeing buildings pop up and perhaps a commercial store open, but the tax revenue for the property owner is somewhat delayed or only partially received until that, because there was a community improvement plan incentive there to get it built. So that's the second reason why you see delay. And I guess I'll just end with there was, with the pandemic, I would say a real wave of I'll say with the pandemic and the extremely low interest rates that came about in 2021, 2022, where mortgages, you could get a mortgage for under 2%, for example. There was a real push to build. You put mortgage rates now back in the 6% range, and there has been some decline across Canada in new housing being built. Of course, that's actually will make our housing problem over the coming years even worse. But we do expect interest rates to fall over time as well. So hopefully those mortgage rates can get down at least below 5% to a normalized rate. 2% was not normal either.
Thank you for that, Gord. We've got one final question from the public, and this will be the last one that we answer before wrapping up. Alita asks, please advise if a wage freeze could be used for municipal employees in order to lower the percentage increases needed.
I think I'll ask Kathy to join in on this one if she can. Or maybe Kathy, if you want to just take it, go ahead.
Sure, happy to share. Thank you for the question. We do get asked this question pretty much every year in our budget process. Wage freezes are very difficult to accomplish for a number of reasons. First of all, like every employer, the municipality is also an organization that is competing for talent and wanting to make sure that we have the proper and competent people in the right roles to deliver the services that Chatham-Kent residents expect from us, for sure. And so that's one thing. In order to be competitive is one thing. Another element of it is that throughout our organization, we have a number of unions that we negotiate their rates of pay and good faith with. And it is appropriate that we honor what those rates are. And so unless we went back into negotiations and requested reductions or freezes in pay, then that isn't something that is possible to do. We do need to make sure that we continue to honor the agreements that we've made. And I would say finally that I appreciate, Alita, that you made a comment in there about many are making over $100,000, a dream for many families. And I'll share with you that the Salary Disclosure Act does require that we provide information to the community about any municipal employee making over $100,000. And that was a provision that was made probably, I'm going to guess, I don't have the exact year on the top of my hand right here, but it was probably about 2 decades ago, maybe more. And so certainly at that point in time when it was implemented, it was considered a very high salary, and it's still obviously considered a high salary, but that number hasn't actually been indexed throughout the last, since its inception. And that number would be considerably higher now if we were actually to do the indexing of that. And the last time that we looked, we would have had 4 people on a list that would have needed to be provided to be shared publicly on that front. But at the end of the day, it really comes down to making sure that we're competitive. We do annually conduct salary surveys to make sure that we are in line with the other positions that are like ours in municipal organizations and who have a similar either size in organization or offer a similar service in the same way. So they have to be comparative in order to make it to the comparison stage with our wages and so forth. So that would be my answer to it. And Gord, I'm not sure if you have anything else you'd like to add back in as well.
Thank you very much for that, Kathy. I'm gonna say we've reached our time. So I'm going to bring our budget chair and CFO back on screen with us here. Just some things to consider as we wrap up here. We have another online public consultation session planned for tomorrow night at 7 p.m., which will again be available through Facebook and YouTube. Budget deliberations will begin on November 28th and run through the 29th and 30th from 6 p.m. to 10 p.m. in council chambers located at the Chatham-Kent Civic Center at 315 King Street West in Chatham. If you would like to submit a written deputation prior to the budget deliberation meetings, you can send them to Budget and Performance Services at ckfps@chatham-kent.ca by noon on November 28th. All deputations for this year's budget are being held on November 28th. All of this information and more is available at chatham-kent.ca/ourbudget. I'd like to thank everybody who has joined us at this session today, and I'll now open it back up to our CFO and to our budget chair for any final comments that they would like to make. Thank you very much.
Thanks. I'll make it very, very brief. We're facing a barrage of issues that aren't just about road work or playgrounds or the fire department. And it's really so we do really understand the with inflation how everything's more expensive these days and that, but I guess the real point I want to make is that just the Ontario municipalities overall, not just Chatham-Kent, we're all being faced with all these, I won't call them downloads, but just more costs than ever before. We mentioned lots of them today, cybersecurity and housing issues and things, and it's being put on the property taxpayer. And so that's that's the tough situation that our council's faced with. And I'll turn it over to Brock to close.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank all the staff that were on today to answer questions, and really appreciate the submissions from members of the community. It is really important to have public input through this process. So as Eric mentioned, there's another opportunity to do that tomorrow night at 7 o'clock in the same format. And of course, you can always email your council members and submit a deputation. I would encourage you to do that early if you can, so for next Tuesday or Wednesday. And we certainly appreciate that feedback, and it does make a difference when we're going through those deliberations. So really appreciate all the feedback today and everyone's involvement, and hope to see some more folks online tomorrow evening as well. Thank you.